Nicolas Cage's career began to stagnate in the second half of the 2000s at the box office. Many of the actor's expensive films began to fail powerfully, such as The Dangerous Bangkok Warlord of The Wicker Man or The Prophet. However, Cage's box office successes still happened in 2007. The sequel to The Nation's Treasures performed well in cinemas in 2009. The banner of the director Alex of the Pole shot well. 2010 was a turning point for Nicolas Cage. He last received a blockbuster budget at his disposal. The Sorcerer's Apprentice was completely Nicolas Cage's project. It was he who owned the idea for the film after the crazy successes of Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter. All Hollywood studios rushed to the search for some fantasy books that could be turned into profitable franchises. Although almost all of these attempts were unsuccessful, however, Nicolas Cage did not know about this or simply pretended not to notice. With his sensible idea that magic exists, he came to his friend producer Jerry Bruckheimer, who in those years was the most important and highest-grossing producer of Hollywood. Bruckheimer Cage until 2010 worked together many times. Rock Air Prison Hijack in 60 Seconds, Dilogy Treasure of the Nation became box office hits only in 2009. Their joint film failed in theaters. Mediocre Darwin's Mission was performed, but it is unlikely that Nicolas Cage, who was responsible for the voice acting of Guinea Pig, can be blamed for the failure of this picture, since Jerry Bruckheimer's weight on the wave of the crazy success of the Pirates of the Caribbean trilogies was very impressive. He easily found a budget of $150 million at the Disney studio for the idea of Nicolas Cage. After all, he was still considered a big star, albeit a little shabby. The plans of the citizens were monumental. The Sorcerer's Apprentice immediately planned to turn into a trilogy. Even a full-length cartoon in the film universe was planned. Here it should be noted that the Disney studio, after franchise About Feathers 3 of the first part, which collected almost $3 billion at the box office, invested money in Bruckheimer without much interest in where they would be spent, because in Hollywood it was believed that Bruckheimer was a chicken that lays golden eggs. All this will eventually lead to a string of failures and a break in relations between the studio producer on the Lone Ranger movie and Bruckheimer's first impressive failure at the Disney studio will be just The Sorcerer's Apprentice. With Nicolas Cage squandering funds on the set of The Sorcerer's Apprentice was huge, and Bruckheimer. Cage received the biggest fees for him in those years. After The Sorcerer's Apprentice, no one else has so much already never made money on the production of A Sorcerer's Apprentice. Cage tried on the costume of an orchestra man. He participated in writing the script, worked as a producer, sat in the editing room and personally looked for fashionable underpants for his hero at Chinese flea markets. But if Van Damme at the dawn of his career managed to take on himself right away, carried how many posts and, as a result, to save problematic films, then in the Cage at the end of a career, such a trick didn't pass. The film didn't work out, but more precisely, it didn't work out, according to the test group and the studio. After rough showing from the film, they removed almost 30 minutes of all this exploration of the mystical world in which he was so interested. Cage remained somewhere behind the scenes. The failure was very serious at the American box office. The Sorcerer's Apprentice collected only $63 million, another $152 million in the world, but all this did not even allow recapturing the production budget. Cage and Bruckheimer actively kicked the unfortunate release date of the film. Two box office monsters in the face of Despicable Me and 3 Toy Stories. A well-performing Karate Kid has not yet taken off from the top 10, and in a neighboring pond, the Master of the Elements is trying to stay afloat, who also had a children's rating. Moreover, Nicolas Cage started at the box office on the same day as the start of Christopher Nolan, which clearly pulled over an older audience that, in theory, could go to a new children's film. With each other and only Nicolas Cage failed. The Master of the Elements is also considered a failure, but he still raised twice as much money as The Sorcerer's Apprentice. In general, The Sorcerer's Apprentice became one of the main losers of the summer season of 2010. Nicolas Cage's career as a big star immediately ended. Actor lost a couple of lucrative contracts, and the budget for the second part of The Ghost Rider was quickly cut by $43 million. If the first Ghost Rider was a blockbuster on the budget, then the sequel became a film already has a different budget category, and after all, the success of The Sorcerer's Apprentice could save Cage. If the film fought back and the studio launched a sequel, it is unlikely that Nikolai would have found himself in films so quickly. No category, and maybe would not have got there at all.